Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. is a serial perpetrator, also known as the Visalia Ransacker, the East Area Predator, the original Night Stalker, and more recently, the Golden State Perpetrator. He was active in Northern California from March 1974, possibly 1968 or mid-1973, to July 1979, and Southern California from October 1979 to May 1986. Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. was born on November 8, 1945, in Bath, New York, to Kathleen Louise DeGroat and Joseph James DeAngelo Sr., a sergeant in the United States Army. DeAngelo Jr. was of Italian ancestry and had two older sisters, Connie and Rebecca, and a younger brother, John. When DeAngelo was a young child, he witnessed the gang assault of his sister Connie by two airmen in a warehouse in West Germany, where the family was stationed at the time. Between 1959 and 1960, DeAngelo attended Mills Junior High School in Rancho Cordova, California. Beginning in 1961, he attended Folsom High School, from which he received a GED certificate in 1964. He played on the school's junior varsity baseball team. DeAngelo committed burglaries, mail theft, and he tortured and ended the lives of animals during his teenage years. DeAngelo joined the United States Navy in September 1964 and served for 22 months during the Vietnam War as a damage controlman on the cruiser USS Canberra and the destroyer tender USS Piedmont. Beginning in August 1968, DeAngelo attended Sierra College in Rocklin, California, where he graduated with an associate degree in police science with honors. In May 1970, DeAngelo became engaged to nursing student Bonnie Jean Colwell, who was a classmate at Sierra College, but she ended the relationship in 1971 after he became manipulative and abusive. He wanted her to help him cheat on an abnormal psychology test. After the breakup, he attempted to force her to marry him by threatening her with a gun. The breakup angered him so much that he would later say, "I hate you, Bonnie," to one of his assault victims. In 1971, he attended Sacramento State University, where he earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. He later took postgraduate courses and further police training at the College of the Sequoias in Visalia, then completed a 32-week police internship at the police department in Roseville. In November 1973, he married Sharon Marie Huddle of Citrus Heights in a ceremony held in Auburn. From May 1973 till August 1976, he was a burglary unit police officer in Exeter, near Visalia, after he relocated from Citrus Heights. There, he was considered by his colleagues as the Black Sheep, an ambitious loner who never quite fit in with them. Approximately in the same time period, he embarked on a prowling and burglary spree as the Visalia Ransacker, and almost certainly ended up investigating his own crimes when he was promoted sergeant in charge of the Exeter Police Department's Joint Attack on Burglary program. As the Visalia Ransacker, he usually prowled around neighborhoods and broke into single-family homes, tearing apart the interior while only stealing small personal trinkets. Part of his modus operandi consisted of placing warning items, such as dishes or bottles, against doors and on door handles, a technique he would later readapt during his career as a serial assaulter. In 1980, DeAngelo and Sharon bought a house in Citrus Heights. Sharon became a divorce attorney in 1982, and they had 3 daughters. In the 1980s, DeAngelo also started working as a computer engineer and a cashier. From 1990 until his retirement in 2017, he worked as a truck mechanic at a Save Mart supermarket's distribution center in Roseville. Sharon and DeAngelo separated in 1991. He was arrested in 1996 for failing to pay for gas, but the charge was dismissed. DeAngelo's brother-in-law claimed that he would casually bring up the East Area Predator in conversation around the time of the original crimes. The neighbors also reported that he would frequently engage in loud, profane outbursts, and he once threatened neighbors because of their barking dogs. DeAngelo's first reported crime as the Ransacker was on March 19, 1974, but it is presumed that he might have begun as early as in 1968 or 69, or mid-1973. The ransacker was also suspected of perpetrating a number of assaults and ending the lives of people in the area. In the early hours of September 11, 1975, Elizabeth Snelling, who was 16 years old, said she was awakened by an intruder in a ski mask who pointed a gun at her head. Elizabeth said that the intruder told her that he was taking her with him, and if she made any noise, he would shoot her. DeAngelo dragged her out of the house with a gun pointed at her head, and her dad, Claude Snelling, a journalism professor, charged out of the house after them. DeAngelo fired 2 shots, hitting her dad, before turning the gun on her as she was down on the ground. She thought, "This is it." He then started kicking her in the head and face before he ran off. Claude Snelling was 45 years old at the time he lost his life. Elizabeth said he was her hero. Elizabeth said, "Knowing that my dad's perpetrator was never caught left us all feeling very vulnerable." She continued, "Since I was the only living witness, there was a chance he could come after me. The police gave us extra security and patrolled our neighborhood, but I still lived in fear." The last known activity of the ransacker was on December 12, 1975, when he was caught prowling by local detective William McGowan. Detective William was on a stakeout at an area where the ransacker was reported to frequent. When William attempted to detain the man, the suspect shrieked, removed his mask, and feigning surrender after William fired a warning shot in his direction. However, after jumping the fence to a neighboring house, he pulled out a revolver with his left hand and fired once near William's face, shattering his flashlight. Nearby officers rushed to help Detective William, but the shooter was able to escape. Items collected as evidence included the flashlight, tennis shoe tracks, and dropped loot, namely blue chip stamps and a sock full of coins. Detective McGowan would later provide a description of the ransacker while under hypnosis, describing the shooter as baby-faced. On June 18, 1976, the first attack committed by DeAngelo as the East Area Predator occurred in Rancho Cordova at 4 a.m. About 6 months and exactly 7 attacks after the first one, the affected communities began to worry, while the Sheriff Department of Sacramento advised to the news stations to not report the assaults. On October 18th, 2 attacks occurred on the same day, to which the authorities held neighborhood meetings set up to inform civilians and to dispel false rumors. On December 18, 1976, DeAngelo entered the home of his 10th victim, 15-year-old Chris Pedretti, who was home alone while her parents were at a Christmas party. At 6 p.m., as she played the piano, DeAngelo, wearing a ski mask, put a knife to her throat and said to her, "Do what I say or I will end you and be gone in the dark," the phrase that would later serve as the title of Michelle McNamara's book on the case. For more than 2 hours, he assaulted her 3 times. According to Chris, he alternated leaving her outside, naked in the winter cold, and bringing her into different rooms where he assaulted her. He eventually left her on a couch in front of a fireplace, leaving her blindfolded, bound, and gagged before leaving. Chris managed to free herself and called neighbors for help. She described the renewed humiliation that she felt when the police asked her intimate questions that she was not equipped to answer as a 15-year-old, and again when an assault kit was administered. She referred to these interactions as the second and third victimizations that she endured that evening. DeAngelo's initial MO was to stalk middle-class neighborhoods at night in search of women who were alone in one-story homes, usually near a school, creek, trail, or other open space that would provide a quick escape. He was seen a number of times, but always successfully fled. On one occasion, he shot and seriously wounded a young pursuer. Most of his victims had seen or heard a prowler on their property before the attacks happened, and many had experienced break-ins. The police believed that the offender would conduct extensive exploration in a targeted neighborhood, looking into windows and prowling in yards before selecting a home to attack. It was believed that he sometimes entered the homes of future victims to unlock windows, unload guns, and plant ligatures for later use. He frequently telephoned future victims, sometimes for months in advance to learn their daily routines. Although DeAngelo originally targeted women alone in their homes or with children, he eventually preferred attacking couples. This change in his MO is believed to be a direct result of media reports, claiming that he only attacked women alone in the home. His usual method was to break in through a window or sliding glass door and awaken the sleeping occupants with a flashlight, threatening them with a handgun. The victims were subsequently bound with ligatures, often shoelaces, that he found or brought with him. Then he blindfolded and gagged them with towels that he had ripped into strips. The female victim was usually forced to tie up her male companion before she was bound. The bindings were often so tight that the victim's hands were numb for hours after being untied. He then separated the couple, often stacking dishes on the man's back and threatening to end everyone in the house if he heard them rattle. He would then move the woman to the living room and assault her repeatedly. DeAngelo sometimes spent hours in the home ransacking closets and drawers, eating food in the kitchen, drinking beer, assaulting the woman again, or making additional threats. On April 2nd of 1977, after more than 15 individual attacks occurred, the first couple was attacked. On May 17th, Sacramento County was thrust into a state of panic after the East Area Predator threatened to slay his next two victims. As a result, the sheriff patrols were increased, and even civilians formed their own patrols. However, the East Area Predator sent a taunt to the heightened security by attacking his first couple in Sacramento's South area, near the office of a dentist, who contributed an additional $10,000 to the $15,000 reward for his apprehension. On September 6th, the first couple in Stockton was attacked, leading to the same effect of heightened security found in Sacramento County. Believing that the East Area Predator had moved on to the next community, patrols in Sacramento County disappeared, only for another couple to be attacked in the College Greens Glenbrook area. On February 2nd, 1978, a young couple, 21-year-old Brian Keith Maggiore, a military policeman at Mather Air Force Base, and his 20-year-old wife, Katie Lee Maggiore, were walking their dog in the Rancho Cordova area, near where 5 East Area Predator attacks had occurred. The couple fled after a confrontation in the street, but were chased down and were fatally shot. Some investigators suspected that they had been slain by the East Area Predator because of their proximity to the other attack's location, and the fact that a shoelace, which was frequently employed to tie up the victims, was found nearby. On June 5th, 1978, the East Area Predator turned up for the first time in Stanislaus County, assaulting a couple living in Northeast Modesto. Between that date and July 5th of 1979, he had been active in Modesto, Davis, Concord, Danville, San Ramon, San Jose, Fremont, and Walnut Creek. The attacks abruptly ended after an attempted attack on July 5th, 1979, when an almost victim who was a light sleeper woke up and found a man putting on a ski mask, chasing the intruder away. The East Area Predator briefly resurfaced on October 1st. He entered the home of a couple and tied them up. While he was busy ransacking the house for valuables, the couple managed to escape, and the intruder was forced to flee on a bicycle. The entire crime spree loosely coincided with DeAngelo's service as an Auburn police officer, from August 1976 to July 1979, when he was arrested for shoplifting a hammer and dog repellent. The attacks abruptly ended in the same month. He was sentenced to 6 months of probation and was fired that October. As a form of retaliation for his firing, DeAngelo went to the house of the chief of police, whose life he had threatened earlier, and started peeping through his daughter's bedroom window with a flashlight. This has not been confirmed to have been him, but whoever he was, he ran away as soon as he realized his presence had been detected. On December 30th, 1979, DeAngelo committed his first crimes as the original Night Stalker, ending the lives of Dr. Robert Offerman and Deborah Manning by fatally shooting both. Dr. Robert presumably managed to escape from his bonds and attempted to fight back before he was shot. On March 13, 1980, the next victims, Lyman and Charlene Smith, were found deceased, this time by bludgeoning with a fireplace log. At this time, it was revealed that the bonds used to restrain the victims were tied in a diamond knot, hence his lesser-known nickname, the Diamond Knot Perpetrator. Months later, Keith and Patrice Harrington were also slain, and then, on February 5, 1981, the original Night Stalker ended the life of his first lone victim, Manuela Withun. There were 3 more crimes after this one: Sherry Domingo and Gregory Sanchez on July 27th, and Janelle Lisa Cruz on May 4th, 1986. In 1990 or 1991, the criminal made his last known contact with the public on a phone call he made to one of his victims. Then, he disappeared completely, and no lives that were ended or assaults committed by him have followed. About a decade later, in 2001, a remarkable connection was made by the authorities. It was discovered that the DNA of the original Night Stalker and the East Area Predator belonged to the same individual, making the unknown perpetrator the most prolific serial offender in California history. 32 years after the ending of his spree and 45 years after the beginning of his crimes, DeAngelo was finally arrested on April 24, 2018, by Sacramento County Sheriff's deputies. He was still living in Citrus Heights with one of his daughters and a grandchild at the time. DeAngelo had been identified 4 months earlier as the main suspect when DNA from an ONS assault case was uploaded to GED Match. With help from a genealogist, Paul Holes, a sheriff investigator who worked on the Iran's cold cases, and an FBI lawyer constructed a family tree based on GED Match's results and eventually narrowed the list to DeAngelo. After a DNA sample was surreptitiously collected from the door handle of DeAngelo's car, it was matched with samples related to the Golden State perpetrator's crimes. The latter nickname was coined by true crime writer Michelle McNamara, who was writing an account of the Iran's case titled "I Will Be Gone in the Dark: One Woman's Obsessive Search for the Golden State Perpetrator." The book was published posthumously on February 27, 2018, nearly 2 years after McNamara's demise by an accidental illegal substance overdose, and 2 months before DeAngelo's arrest. Over a period of 20 months, DeAngelo is believed to have been responsible for taking 1 life and around 120 burglaries as the Visalia ransacker. He was charged with 8 counts of first-degree slaying with special circumstances. On May 10th, the Santa Barbara County District Attorney's Office charged DeAngelo with 4 additional counts of first-degree slaying. In July 2018, several months after DeAngelo's arrest, his then-wife filed for a divorce, which was finalized the following year. DeAngelo committed most of the offenses while he was married and raising a family. Neither his wife nor his children ever suspected he was committing serious crimes. His eldest daughter claimed that he was a perfect father, while his wife believed his excuses for being away from home. DeAngelo made a confession of sorts after his arrest that cryptically referred to an inner personality named Jerry, who had forced him to commit the wave of crimes that ended abruptly in 1986. According to Sacramento County Prosecutor Tien Ho, DeAngelo said the following to himself while alone in a police interrogation room after his arrest in April 2018. "I did not have the strength to push him out. He made me. He went with me. It was like in my head. I mean, he is a part of me. I did not want to do those things. I pushed Jerry out and had a happy life. I did all those things. I destroyed all their lives. So now I have got to pay the price." Detectives ignored DeAngelo's initial request to speak to an attorney, later citing a legal theory that this potential Miranda violation would be justified, with the understanding that the prosecutors could not use the interview against the defendant in court. DeAngelo was formally charged on August 13, 2018, with the first-degree slaying of Claude Snelling in 1975. DeAngelo could not be charged with assaults or burglaries, as the statute of limitations had expired for those offenses. But he was charged with 13 counts of slaying and 13 counts of kidnapping. DeAngelo was arraigned in Sacramento on August 23, 2018. At an April 10, 2019, court proceeding, the prosecutors announced that they would seek the end-of-life penalty, and the judge ruled that cameras could be allowed inside the courtroom during the trial. On March 4, 2020, DeAngelo offered to plead guilty if the end-of-life penalty was taken of the table, which was not accepted at the time. On June 29th, as part of a plea bargain to avoid the end-of-life penalty, DeAngelo pleaded guilty to all 26 counts. On August 21st, 2020, DeAngelo received multiple consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He offered a brief apology after listening to days of pre-sentencing victim impact statements. He said, "I have listened to all your statements, each one of them, and I am truly sorry to everyone I have hurt." Following DeAngelo's conviction, his sister Rebecca stated that he was abused by their father while he was growing up. In November 2020, DeAngelo was transferred to the North Kern State Prison. As of February 2025, DeAngelo is incarcerated in protective custody at California State Prison, Corcoran. Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. will forever be known as being part of the case that demonstrated the power of genetic genealogy in solving cold cases. A Springfield altar boy who was found deceased almost 50 years ago was likely slain by a priest he knew. 13-year-old Danny Croteau was found in the Connecticut River in Chicopee, Massachusetts, on April 15, 1972. Still dressed in his clothes from the previous school day, the medical examiner's office ruled that Danny lost his life due to blunt force trauma to the head. When Danny's body was found, he had a blood alcohol level that would make him legally drunk, and both his stomach and pocket were full of chewing gum. While DNA testing was inconclusive, Danny's DNA and a priest named Richard Levine's blood types were both tied to the scene of the crime. Danny's brother recalled a telephone call 2 days after Danny's demise from a voice that sounded like Levine's, apologizing for ending the life of their brother. The voice said, "We are very sorry what happened to Danny. He saw something behind the circle he should not have seen. It was an accident." Richard Levine was a Roman Catholic priest and friend of the Croteau family. He frequently spent time with Danny and his brothers without their parents. Levine was a person of interest following Danny's demise after telling the police inconsistent stories and being seen at the riverbank on April 16th. The brothers said that Danny would come home sick to his stomach from alcohol after being with the priest, but a lack of evidence left the case unsolved for decades. Almost 5 decades later, during 2020, the investigators were able to gather enough evidence to prove that Levine was the perpetrator. A key breakthrough involved a series of interviews with Levine. The district attorney Anthony Gallooni said that Levine granted hours of recorded interviews with state investigators over the past few months. Through all the interviews, Levine refused to affirmatively admit that he ended Danny's life. District attorney said, Levine at times was cagey and evasive, continuing his long-running attempts to mislead and distract investigators. However, he made several statements to indicate that he was the last person to see Danny alive, that he brought him to the riverbank on April 14, 1972, that he physically assaulted him there, and after leaving Danny there, in his words, and returning a short time later, that he saw Danny floating face down in the river. Levine was asked, "What did you do with the object after you hit him?" He told the investigator he tossed it in the water. In a recording of one of the interviews, Levine is heard saying, "I just remember being heartbroken when I saw his body going down the river, knowing I was responsible for giving him a good shove, you know." Levine said he did not try to rescue Danny or tell police or Danny's family about his whereabouts. Levine also possessed a letter, which the investigators obtained in 2004 after learning of it from a separate investigation of a different clergy member, that referenced a young boy along the Chicopee River where Danny was slain. Decades after Danny's demise, in 1992, Levine was convicted of child molestation and was defrocked in 2003. The priest-led Danny's family parish and had personal relationships with many altar boys, several of whom later accused him of long-term abuse. The victims were altar boys like Danny, and recalled that the priest used alcohol and chewing gum to loosen the kids' inhibitions. One of Levine's molestation victims recalled that Danny said during a camping trip the boys took with the priest in 1968, "I will tell." According to the witness, the priest turned extremely serious after the fact. The district attorney outlined several recent statements by Levine's molestation victims who claimed the ex-priest had a violent temper and made you feel guilty for the abuse he perpetrated. DeAngelo said that he had authorized the investigators to present the evidence to a magistrate judge in order to obtain an arrest warrant for Levine on October 22, 2021, but then learned that he had already passed away that same day at the age of 80. DeAngelo said, "Based on the accumulation of evidence, and in particular those admissions, as a prosecutor, I believe that I was fulfilling my ethical duties by moving toward the charge of the crime against Richard Levine, and I believe we could prove it." Galuni said that the case was officially closed due to the perpetrator no longer being alive to be prosecuted. He also said that he made this announcement for Danny's parents, Carl and Bernice, who passed away awaiting justice for their son. Joe Croteau, Danny's brother, said that his family is disappointed that Levine will not be brought to justice, but believe there is a higher power and he will face that higher power now.